Welcome back. Doing another showdown today where we're going to be taking the Object 263 against the Foch 155. Both really good tank destroyers at tier 10. And we're going to find out by putting both of these against each other, best out of 3 rounds, which one will be the winner. And go over just some of the comparisons of these tanks and my personal preference on which one I like more and why my reason is the way that it is. And you'll have to let me know in the comments below which one you guys prefer. If you have these tanks and your thoughts on it. So in looking at both of these tanks, there are some pretty serious differences that are going to determine the play style of how both of these tanks fight each other. The Object 263 has a much more consistent firing cannon with higher DPM. Now, the Foch 155 has 2 different cannons, and this one, we're going off of the cannon that most people use, which is the 2-shell auto-loading cannon that comes with the Foch. So the Object 263 has about 400 or 500 more DPM than the Foch is 2-shell autoloader. The penetration is about the same going back from standard ammunition to its premium ammunition. I think the Foch has worse penetration with its standard shell, but it does have slightly better, like 10 millimeters, I believe, of more penetration with its premium ammunition. The Foch does have a little bit better aim time, but the Object 263 does have better dispersion. And for gun dispersion, the Object 263 only has 4 degrees of gun depression, while the Foch does have a little bit more. That does help. And with its maneuverability, the Foch actually has more engine power to weight ratio, giving it a little bit more of that power when picking up speed. However, the Object 263's top speed is, I think, 5 kilometers an hour faster. And then in terms of armor, the Object 263 does have more hull armor. However, I feel like the weak spot around the entire gun is fairly easy to penetrate, can be a little trollish at times, and then the Foch has pretty good armor still, not as good as the Object 263. Still pretty good, and does have that weak cupola on top. So the differences in fighting with these two tanks, the Object 263 is known as the YOLO wagon. With its great armor and its good maneuverability, you can really just rush right in, start taking shots, you have excellent DPM, wiggle that tank around, and really just rip the enemy apart if you know how to use it correctly and know how to use your armor, which gives it that name of the YOLO wagon. The Foch 155, little bit different with that autoloader. Once you put out those 2 shells, you do have to roll back, get into some sort of cover, some sort of support, so that you can be protected until you can get fully reloaded. Now, back in the day when the Foch 155 had the autoloader first introduced, as a matter of fact, when the Foch Tier 10 first came out, it only had the standard 640 average damage shot cannon, just like a lot of the other TDs in the game. They made a little different, gave it the autoloader, and back then it had an average damage of 640 per shell. They've actually dropped that to 560, so a bit of a difference there. When people would get into platoons with these two tanks, it was the most like trollish seal clubbing thing you could do, because if you think about it, in that intermittent time between shooting your shells and an autoloader really didn't take that long, and having a platoon Foch 155 you could come around and basically take out an entire mouse with both those Foch tanks just unloading those rounds. So yeah, they definitely nerfed the Foch so that its average damage per shot with this auto-loading cannon was not as much as it used to be. So far in this second round, things are looking a little tough for the Foch, which may end up tying things up. And that is it. So the score is tied. Now, in my opinion, in terms of normal game play style, I would say I like the Foch 155 better, in my opinion. I feel like that little bit of extra degree in gun depression, the fact that it does have more maneuverability, I just feel more comfortable in the Foch 155. Whereas in the Object 263, where I just feel like even though on paper it has more hull armor, I don't have a whole lot of luck even when angling, maybe not as much as some, but I seem to get penned quite easily around the gun. Along with that, 4 degrees of gun depression can be a bit of a challenge. So in terms of like one I like to play in battle and one that I prefer in a normal game of Blitz is the Foch 155. But if I had to guess before this showdown was over, my guess was on the Object 263 just because of that extra higher DPM. We're gonna see if in this final round that ends up being the case. So good push here and an excellent tactic from these Objects 263s coming up from behind, completely sandwiching these Foch tanks, really putting them in a bad spot. With their amount of penetration they have, these 263s do not have much of a hard time cutting through, and the fact they've got less dispersion makes it just, I feel like, gives it that edge, and why I think in a showdown like this the 263 would win. Yeah, the Foch just not having that consistent firing like a standard cannon does. And even once it's clipped out, having to have that slightly longer reload, plus not having as high of DPM, is a little bit of a challenge. So great game. Object 263 had taken the winning cup for this round. Hope you guys enjoyed today's vid. This is the Muffin here. You guys stay cool and keep tanking.